and welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. And we are going to go into our passage here. Is that where we are? Make sure. Yes. So where we are, as you can see, we're on the Shlishi portion at this point, and we have had that whole episode of Jacob wrestling with this angel. And one of the major interpretations is that this is Esau's Sar. A Sar is like a prince, and understood by that as Esau's guardian angel. That and there's of course a lot to unpack in that notion of here's a human being that is Jacob having to overcome the guardian angel of another human being. And what does that imply in terms of the battle of the spirit, perhaps, the battle of karma, if I was going to mix my metaphors? At any rate, it certainly is full of potential meaning there. So he's finished, and the angel has blessed him. He overcame the angel, and he would not let the angel go until the angel blessed him. And the blessing,
Rabbi,
yes,
is that why we don't eat the thigh bone?
yes, I believe we're going to discuss that. We are going to actually perhaps even cover that, right? And again, you know, the significance of that is also something to ponder. uh, okay, so there's a lot of mixed meanings here. So he blesses him, and the angel's blessing is that his name will no longer be Jacob, which has the meaning of, or the connotation of, supplanting, right? Holding on to Esau's heel when the twins were born, as if he was trying to prevent Esau from emerging first and becoming firstborn. So that kind of all the connotations involved in that, but would be Yisrael, which would mean one who wrestles. So it's not all that different in a way, if you think about it, right? But one who wrestles not necessarily with God. The word El means mighty beings, with powerful beings, and is able to, despite the fact of being injured, nevertheless is able to overcome them. So there's a lot to be said there as to what that has to do and how that implies the fate of the Jewish people in terms of our experience in Galut, in exile, that is an essential part of our experience. And perhaps our experience in exile, if we wanted to think about that and meditate that, is to see our lives as exile, that our existence into this world, that this world, in a sense, is itself an exile. So, and there are wonderful implications about the experience of exile. So, Vayikra Yaakov Shem HaMakom Pniel, right? Jacob called the name of that place Pniel, to encounter God, or God has, or I have seen, my face has seen God. Ki ra'iti Elohim panim el panim, for I have seen God panim el panim, face to face, vatinatzel nafshi, and my soul was rescued. Now again, whether Elohim here necessarily means Hashem Elohim, or whether Elohim here means the angel, is a reference to the angel and the fact that here he was as a mortal human being, wrestling with this divine being and able to emerge alive. I wouldn't say unscathed, but alive. And of course, we have this parallel, right? We're aware of that earlier passage where he was fleeing. Here he's on his way back to the land of his fathers, but before he was escaping from it, and he had a different kind of experience there, but also made some kind of dedication in naming that place. Of course, he named it Bethel, but this is Pniel. So again, there's some parallel going on here. There is no Rashi on this. vaYishlach lo Hashemesh, and the sun came up for him, rose for him, shone for him. Ka'asher avar, as he passed over it Pnuel. So now notice the Yud and the Vav are somewhat interchangeable. So the same place, but here it's called or spelled out Pnuel. And again, does the Vav mean and, or does the Vav mean but? But he was limping on his thigh, on his yerech. So there is Rashi about this. vaYishlach lo Hashemesh. The sun arose for him, for him. Now, Rashi says, well, wait a second, let's not get too excited about this. Lashon b'nei Adamhu. This is, he says, this is typical human expression. So, for example, you'll say to somebody, that when we arrive, this is in a conversation, right? When one says to someone else, when we arrived at a certain place, He'ir lanu hashachar, the dawn broke for us. Zehu pshuto, and that's the simple meaning of this verse. Is not to make too much of the law that's in here. It's simply that's what happens when you arrived at a certain place. You can say, the sun arose for us, or we were greeted by the sun, or something like that, right? Umidrash agada. However, there's also an agadic approach to this. vaYishlach lo. So we can say, law, what's this law doing here? Because the sentence would have made sense if all we were talking about was that when the night was over and the sun arose, he was leaving, right? And he was limping on his thigh. It says, litzorcho. It was for his needs, that the sun arose to take care of his needs. L'rapot et silato, to heal his limping, his limp. And how does Rashi get this? Or how do our sages come up with this? We have an example that alludes to this idea. Kamadatema, as is stated, Shemesh tzedakah umarpeh, a son of righteousness. This is S-U-N, of course, right? A son of righteousness, umarpeh, and healing. Beknafeha, in its wings, or in its this is let me look and see how they possibly translate this. And let's see, yes, in its wings, that's how it is translated. Otan sha'ot, and as for those hours, shemihira lishkoa bishvilo, as the sun hastened to set bishvilo, for him, for Jacob, kesheyatsa mi Be'ersheva, when he left Be'ersheva, mihara lizroach bishvilo. On the other side now, the sun came up earlier for him. Again, lots to unpack about this. What's the significance of talking about the sun, right? I mean, even back then, we realized, we're tiny little, almost insignificant mortals, in the face of these luminaries, etc. But to say the connection somehow, that there is a universal connection, a connection that operates on a universal level for those people who act in righteous ways, that the effects of righteousness and the effects, of course, sadly, of wickedness aren't just personal. They have ripple effects on the universe, and there is a corresponding, and this I think is somewhat of a mystical concept, that there's also this reflection on the universe to us and for us. and he was limping. Haya Tzolea keshezarcha hashemesh. So Rashi tries to pull out some significance here that he wasn't limping until then. It was only as the sun came up that he was limping on his leg. Incidentally, from a literary and a mystical point of view, the sun is something characterized by Jacob. Jacob is characterized by the sun. And there's a direct allusion in Joseph's one dream where he says he saw the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the 11 stars bowing down to him. Remember, in that early dream. And of course, the son there is his father, Jacob. So there's some connection. And again, if we're going to tease this out, you ask yourself, so what's the significance of the sun, right? The sun allows for growth, right? The sun allows for feelings of warmth, etc. And likewise, if we were to look at the Torah, right, as a metaphor, that the sun is a metaphor for the Torah as well. Obviously, we use the word tree, we use the word water. All these are potential metaphors for the Torah and that way of life. But that Jacob, through his offspring, brings life, is a life-giving force to the world, just as the sun is a life-giving force to the world on a physical level. So here we go, Harlan. This is your passage here. So, okay, so this is like an editorial comment, right? Here in the midst of our narrative. Al kain lo yochlu v'nei Israel. And for this reason, the children of Israel do not eat, do not consume et gid hanasheh. So this is so interesting, right? The sinew, gid is a sinew, hanasheh, that moved, right? It moved out of its socket or out of its place. Asher al, which is on kaf hayarech, which is on the hollow of the thigh. Ad hayom hazeh, until this day. As I said, this is like a editorial comment. Ki naga b'kaf yerech Yaakov, for he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh, the gid hanasheh, in this gid, at the sinew, hanasheh, which will translate moved, something like that.
Was
So
that an evil? Was that an evil angel? It was an evil angel, wasn't it? It was Esau's evil angel, but it was an evil angel wrestling with
okay.
Jacob.
So I'm not in a hurry to call it an evil angel. The angel had a job to do to protect Esau. And in a sense, that's why it was wrestling with Jacob. And it has to do with all the spiritual forces that Esau stands for. Now I don't want to just simply call it evil. I think when you call something evil, it puts it into a box, and life is far more shaded and complicated than that. Nevertheless, yes, I mean, on the other hand, it was an opposing angel, right? It was opposing him, and it had an effect on him, nevertheless. So even though he overcame that angel, it came at a certain price. And I suspect, as I'm trying to meditate and think about the significance of this particular mitzvah, there's something, obviously, the fact that there's this practice and the idea that it's supposed to be practiced forever, essentially, right? Means that it must be significant. There must be some significant message that's involved in all of this. I have not done enough meditating or research to be really able to come up with a super explanation of this, other than somehow warning us, perhaps reassuring us, of saying that we are going to encounter conflict. We are going to encounter it. But that if we are determined and firm, that and experienced, we will be able to surmount that, but not to expect that it won't have its effect on us. That nothing so black and white, and not to feel discouraged by that. So that's just some very, superficial ideas that might be raised from this. But let me go back and see what we can do with the Rashi here. So, Gid Hanashe, the sinew that moved. Belama nikra shmo Gid Hanashe. Why is this particular sinew referred to as Gid Hanashe? Lefi shenasha mimkumo. The reason is because it was removed or moved away from its place. Va'ala, and went up. It moved up. So moving up is generally a positive thing, but nevertheless, it caused a limp. Bahu lashon kfitza. So likewise, there's a meaning of it as to jump, to kfitza. V'chein, and so we have, and you know that Rashi is wonderfully rigorous, does his best to be rigorous with us when he makes claims. So Yirmiyahu Nun Aleph, Jeremiah 51, Nashta Giborim. So Gvuratam, sorry, their bravery, I think, means was removed, jumped away. And likewise, and so he's saying another passage from Jeremiah. Nope, not forgive me. Even though this is referring to an Ibid, and you'd think Ibid would refer to Jeremiah, he's actually referring to Genesis. Genesis chapter 41, and this is where Joseph, after he is restored, his fortunes are restored in the house of Pharaoh, Kinashani Elohim et kol amalai, or amali. For God has caused me to forget, to be removed from all my travail.
Rabbi, I would think that, his sinew moving would kind of be a harmful thing, but it's also does parallel the fact that the land moved for him and the sun rose for him.
Right.
And it seems like somehow there's this mystical obedience or maybe in this case disobedience, I don't know, but mystical effect that of inanimate objects that Jacob has.
So what you're saying to me, though, is also causing me to think about the fact that we have to change. That something within us, we have to be capable of making changes as we go through life struggles. And the truth is, we talk about wounded healers, but there've also been some really wonderful couple maybe of movies made about, for example, physicians who were very arrogant and were then became ill themselves and had to experience what it was like to be a patient, and it changed their personalities. They lost all sense of arrogance when this happened to them. So we are talking about some kind of change, and but I also love what you're saying in terms of how, again, if we are looking at this from a literary point of view, this sympathy, right? I think that's what I would call it, between inanimate objects or celestial objects and the human being, and I think part of it is just recognizing, and this is something, of course, that Native Americans were aware of, is just how important it is for us to try and live in harmony with the universe. That's
Rabbi, I
yeah.
think that Jacob was a deceiver when he was younger,
Yes.
and then he was given a name Israel, but he became a mensch later on.
I think that's one of the things I've noticed for a while now, Harlan. Absolutely, that one of what makes the story of Jacob so profound as literature is that we see character development. We don't see that so much in any of the other patriarchs. But with Jacob, we do see character development. And what I love about it too is that he is a patriarch, right? He is considered to be a role model. And the idea of the fact that we don't have to be perfect, right? We don't have to start off perfect and these great, unbelievable kinds of characters for us to really find a place, in the presence of God. That we may have perfections, and that's okay only in the sense of saying that it doesn't cut us out of being able to forge a deep, deep, abiding connection to the universe and to the creator of the universe. But the idea is for us to be working on ourselves and to be able to recognize our faults. Now, we don't see necessarily Jacob having this moment of, reflection personally, although there is that wonderful, wonderful prayer that he says that was at the beginning of our Parsha, where he says, Katonti mikola chasadim. He says to God, I am unworthy of all the kindness you've shown me. And I think having that sense of appreciation, that sense of gratitude is such a foundational thing, is to have that sense of gratitude in our hearts and to try to use that as the lens through which we see life's experiences.
Well, maybe the reason that he matured and we don't have the evidence of the other patriarchs is maybe they didn't need to in that sense. So maybe it's just been that Abraham had the most direct, relationship with God and the most ability to imitate God, and that each subsequent generation has been somewhat watered so that by Jacob's time, he needed protection and he needed, healing, and he needed help overcoming some obstacles that he had when he was younger to be able to become a mensch. And then, by the time we're in our generation, and that's probably, why Jacob didn't feel worthy, because he did all those things. And by the time of our generation, we're so much more in the need of help and so much more, a deserved sense of unworthiness, and so much more a struggle to try to imitate even the patriarchs, much less God. But that it's like, because he was the third and he's kind of the bridge from them to us.
Right. That's right. That's a very important point. So Abraham, is associated with chesed. Abraham is associated, and Abraham and Sarah are associated with the idea of kindness. And Isaac is associated with the idea of accepting God's judgments, right? Of living life in a place where you accept divine judgment. And Jacob is supposed to be, in a sense, a combination of the two, of rachamim. So that's, but just looking at it from various points of view, and looking at this, again, if we're back to understanding the Bible as literature, it's a story, and it has its own points to make, and it isn't a biography. It is cast in a biographical form because that's an interesting way of, it wants to be interesting. It wants to, reach out to us and captivate our minds. And it doesn't have to have character development in all three. And this is not in any way to negate or lessen the point that you're making, because I think it's a really important point, and especially the fact that Jacob is the last of the patriarchs. But there are lots of chapters, right? There are lots of chapters that deal with Jacob's life. And Jacob's life, of course, is also Joseph's life.
But I think the quality of mercy strengthens my point, because mercy is that quality of being undeserving, but God taking care of you anyway. That's what mercy is. It's not, God doing something because you earned it. It's God taking care of you because God wants to take care of you.
So I believe
you need taken care of.
Yep. I believe that's grace. I believe that is. I could be wrong, but I believe.
Oh, I thought they were synonymous. I'm sorry.
No. Mercy may be if you apologize and God overlooks to some extent the offenses, but grace is undeserved, that undeserved kindness kind of thing, or undeserved forgiveness. Let's just take a moment to see if we can finish this up, this Rashi. There may not be a lot more to go. Okay. Okay, so apparently there are additions of Rashi. Notice the parentheses here. And usually I have to tell you, parentheses, these kinds of parentheses, in a Hebrew text, in a classic Hebrew text, means that something was added that wasn't supposed to be added. That it's left there regardless, but that it's not part of an original text, or it's something that crept in later or something. Anyway, this is in certain editions of the Rashi, al kaf hayerech. So it doesn't sound, actually, it seems okay. I don't know why it's in parentheses, frankly. There it is, right? So it opens there, the parentheses open there. So it says kaf hayerech, and he uses some kind of French word, which I do not recognize at all. Pulpe, I don't know, right? And in Yiddish, and of course, see the parentheses here, because this is the editor of this particular edition of Rashi. Rashi wasn't speaking Yiddish or putting Yiddish into his text. So it's groba dika. So dika, as you can hear, is like thick, right? And groba means coarse. So the kaf hayerech, right? The hollow of the thigh must be, apparently Rashi has a tradition that it has to do with something of the thick part of that. Kol basar gavoha v'chalul v'agul. He says any flesh that is raised and hollow and circular, karui kaf, is called a kaf, which literally can mean a spoon, right? Or the palm, like the palm, not, the bent palm of the hand, right? When you're using it to drink water or something like that, right? So he says, kamo ad she tach techamercha, it looks like, right? Until, forgive me, I'm looking to see, the print is so difficult here, but I believe it's Rashi saying like, and ad shet tit techamercha, some soften. Let's go on with the Rashi and see. Hakaf v'simane bagrut. Right. Okay. So there's some medical, you might say, of definition of what it is to become, it's a sign of puberty, and they're describing this particular sign of incipient puberty. So simane bagrut means the indications of puberty, right? Of becoming a boger, that stage of life, of development. So let's look at the phrase then. It says, right, here we go. Got to go all the way up here. Yeah, okay. Tit marech. That's the word here now that I understand the context, right? So it says until sorry, forgive me, right? Until the crest over the genitals, that's what it means here, right? Is flattened or softened or something like that. That's what it means. So he's quoting from rabbinic material here, where they're trying to determine whether a person has reached their majority or not. And on that interesting note, we will stop for today. So I'm going to make the marking, and we'll start with a new chapter, God willing, tomorrow.
See you in a half an hour, Lauren.
Okay, let me stop the recording, stop the share, stop the recording.